Good evening and welcome to tonight's event, Can We Afford Old Age? My name is Matthew Taylor. I'm a research fellow in the economics program at the Centre for Independent Studies. While there is a growing consensus among policy experts that our current retirement incomes policy is neither sustainable nor equitable, it would seem there is little appetite in Canberra for comprehensive reform. At $44 billion a year, the age pension is the second biggest item on the Commonwealth's budget after transfers to the states. According to the latest intergenerational report, age pension expenditure will more than treble over the next 40 years, but due to an ageing population, the burden of financing this expenditure will fall on fewer working-age Australians. Despite this, the policy positions of the two major parties are defined more by what they will not do rather than what they will. With the help of the Greens, the government has legislated to tighten the assets test for the age pension, but has ruled out any changes to superannuation. The opposition has been highly critical of this move, preferring to rein in super tax concessions for retirees with large super balances. Like so many areas of social policy, it is unwise to consider age pension policy in a vacuum. The pension is but one pillar of Australia's retirement income system, which includes the pension, superannuation and other forms of savings. I'm sure at least one of our panellists will agree. The family home is a too often neglected fourth pillar. Tonight we're privileged to have a panel of policy experts with unique perspectives on retirement incomes policy. Our first panellist, Jeremy Cooper, works at the coalface of our retirement income system as Chairman of Retirement Income at Challenger Limited. Prior to joining Challenger, Jeremy chaired the Cooper Review, which was influential in shaping superannuation policy.
Thanks, Matt. I unashamedly come at this from the second pillar, I suppose, the superannuation or retirement income part. I'm really going to walk through what I think some of the issues are. Okay, so looking at it from a retirement income perspective, because let's face it, that an efficient and well-operating retirement income system can do a lot of heavy lifting in relation to the cost of growing old. So, why would we do this now? Why would we tinker with the retirement income system at this moment? Well, we've just had the intergenerational report out, and it tells us very clearly that age-related expenditures in the budget are an ever-increasing problem going out to 2055. We've had baby boomers retiring at the rate of about 700 a day since 2011, when the post-war baby boom started retiring. We now have larger retirement balances. The superannuation system is sufficiently old that the median male is retiring with something like, let's call it 225,000. That's the typical worker today, is retiring with about that much money. Unfortunately, his female counterpart is retiring with about half that. But these amounts are not amounts that you could go off and buy a sheep station with, but they are amounts that you can do something sensible with in your retirement years, and something that can also ameliorate age pension costs. We've got increasing life expectancies. Think of averages of 88 for males and 90 for females for today's 65-year-olds, and that's ever increasing. And I'm going to show you some charts as to just how quickly those numbers have shot up to those sort of levels. And remember, of course, they're only averages. That's the peak of a bell curve that goes just as much in the right direction as it does the left. We know that as people age, they become less able to deal with the complex issues that surround retirement. And we've got a large financial system inquiry report still on the table that's recommending for the very first time that we really quite sharply define what the principal and secondary objectives of the superannuation system are. And I'd have to say that after talking about these sorts of issues for a number of years now, I think the industry is actually ready to get a much sharper product going in retirement, and to look after retirees a little bit better than it's being done at the moment. But let's just quickly look at how dramatically people's lifespans have been increasing. Now, this is quite a complicated slide, but the two things that we need to focus on. Oops, that's made it go away altogether. I'll quickly flick back to that chart, and I won't try and use pointers. What this diagram's showing us is that in 1992, the most frequent age of death for older Australians was 78. That's what all those complicated lines are telling us. So that's 1992, most common age of death, the mode in statistical terms was 78. 20 years forward in 2012, that number has gone up by 9 years to 87. So roughly every 2 years over that 20 years, the most common age of death of Australians went up by a year, or roughly a year. And so that gives you an idea of the pace of change. It's little wonder that this life expectancy, extra longevity problem has felt like it snuck up on us very quickly, because in actual fact it has. And the important thing about this chart is these are not forward projections as you often get in the life expectancy game. These are actually looking backwards. This is the Bureau of Statistics saying, okay, in these years, how many Australians died and what age were they? So that's the life expectancy problem illustrated for you in one particular way. And here's another way. This is looking at the variability. So we all talk about these averages of life, and the olive green bar in the middle is showing this is 2012, is showing you that in that year the average life expectancy was 83. And the mode, again, consistently with what I said before, you'll see the tallest bar there is at age 87, so that's the most common age at which people died. And then the red bars are what statisticians talk about. It's one standard deviation either side of the average. So in a typical, in 2/3 of cases, you'll be somewhere along that rather wide degree of variations of lifespan. So we talk about averages, but the actual challenge in retirement is that we have really no idea, within a very broad range of possibilities, how long we're actually going to live. So that's just another problem. Now here's a happy story, dreadfully complicated graph, but it's a very happy story, because in Australia for the first time in 2012, and it's happening every year now, here's the punchline, we have more people dying each year who are over 100 than in the first year of life. So you'll see the peak of the very, very faint line there is the most current data, and that's showing that more and more people are dying over the age of 100, because we now have 4,000 or 5,000 Australians who are in that happy territory of being over 100. And we've really solved infant mortality down here on the left-hand side. A large part of that will be the Indigenous population, but nonetheless we have a very, very low infant mortality. So less people are dying in the first year than the group of people over 100 who are dying. So that's a positive. These longevity stories are not all negative. Let's think about getting better retirement income products, and this goes right to the heart of the Murray, the financial system inquiry that's currently on the table at the moment. And recommendation 11 went to coming up with a thing called a comprehensive income product for retirement that was meant to solve many, many different problems in retirement. And I've put a word cloud up there to try and illustrate the number of different moving parts that are going on in a product like that, seeking to solve longevity risk, the risk of living too long and running out of money, the need to be able to spend money safely in retirement rather than taking risks. I've put words up there like deferred annuity, which is a product that we're hoping will be available in Australia soon, which will enable you to effectively insure against living a very, very long time, so that the product might provide income to you at the age of 85 and beyond, should you live that long. So the idea of this slide is really just to show how complex some of these issues are. But if we get them right, and we're hoping that the government will support the recommendation for these products, they certainly will go towards helping people have more efficient retirements economically, and this will indeed reduce the burden of the age pension on the budget. Another challenge we have at the moment is our ultra-low interest rate environment. Now, back in April, I did an opinion piece for the Financial Review that simply pointed out that with the ultra-low long-term bond rates that we have at the moment, at that point the 10-year bond rate was 2.2%, that what this does is it increases effectively the future cost, the burden of retirement, so that if the government was sitting down thinking, how much is the age pension going to cost us over the next next 30 or 35 years at using a very, very low discount rate like we currently have at the moment, what that does is it just keeps pushing those liabilities up. So I just pointed out if you wanted to buy the age pension from the government, which of course you can't do, but just hypothetically, if you wanted to buy a guaranteed stream of income for the rest of your life as a couple from the government, it would cost you over $1 million at today's interest rates. It was really just trying to stimulate some discussion about the effect of ultra-low interest rates on retirement. What it does, it just puts the cost of retirement up. Anyway, there was a firestorm of commentary, and people were very surprised at just how little $1 million could buy. But the trick was that it was all about the interest rate. At a normal bond rate of, say, 6%, that cost would come down to say, 400,000 or 500,000, which we're all relatively comfortable with. So that's just another variable, I suppose, that makes retirement more complex. And indeed, I suppose if people are exhausting their retirement savings because they can't get sufficient returns, that's going to put additional pressure on the age pension. Another issue is the extent to which people are carrying debt into retirement. What this slide is showing us is various things. The brown line is effectively showing you that it's, over a 20-year period, it's been fairly constant that people in the 55 to 64-year-old age group have about 80% have owned their homes. But what it is showing is that the brown piece is the proportion of those homeowners who still have a mortgage in that age group. So what we're seeing is 20-odd years ago in 1994-95, it was only 10% of the cohort who were that age, who owned a home, who actually had a mortgage. Now, over on the right-hand side in 2010, 2012, which is the latest data that we've been able to get on this, we see that 35% of people in that age bracket are carrying mortgages at that point. So that's a significant increase. And in a sense, what we think is happening, and this next slide demonstrates that we probably know what's happening, is that they're effectively pre-consuming some of their retirement savings and pouring it into the house. So this is 65-year-olds plus, and what we see is that the mortgage is effectively being extinguished by the super balance. So what that's showing is the number of people who own a home over 65 and still have a mortgage was 4.7%. That's the blue line in the middle there. 4.7% 20-odd years ago, and it's only 7.5% now. So what people are doing is they're using their superannuation to pay off their mortgages quite late in life. And of course, there are some quite strong incentives for them to do this, which I'm sure we'll touch on later in the discussion. Just today, the Productivity Commission put out a very useful report on superannuation policy post-retirement, and they were looking at two things. What do people do? Are people still taking lump sums out of superannuation and buying a caravan and using it for things that don't really relate to retirement? Or are they tending towards investing the money in income streams and so on? And they found that this is what we already knew, but they found there's a very strong trend towards people keeping the money in superannuation, putting it into income streams and not taking a lump sum. So tick to that. But then they asked, well, what would happen if we increase the age at which you can access super? In the jargon of superannuation, that's called the superannuation preservation age. What if we increased that from the current levels up to 65? What would that do? So what that's doing is it's locking off superannuation to people until much closer to the increased ages at which you can access the age pension, just being increased to 67. And then in the budget, it was announced that way off in 2035, that the age pension access age would be increased to 70. So you can see the need to keep those ages pretty much in alignment. So because of the way that the preservation age works, this change would take some time to have impact. But the Productivity Commission says that if this were implemented, it would save about $7 billion annually in the budget, because people would be in the workforce longer, they'd be paying tax to do that, they would be building up their super, there would be higher super balances going into retirement, which would tend to, again, take pressure off the age pension. Another interesting lever, I suppose, you can look at in terms of the cost of old age is how many people stay in the workforce. And it's very interesting that the OECD very, very recently put out a study looking at the 33 or 34 countries in the OECD and ranking them in terms of mature age workforce participation. Now, very sadly, a bit like the rugby, New Zealand are ranked second and we're ranked 15th. And PricewaterhouseCoopers then pointed out, well, what would it look like if we could get Australia to where New Zealand is in the rankings? And some quite interesting numbers fell out of that calculation. It'd add $24 billion to our GDP. It would take pressure off the boat, all the usual things that you would expect. So workplace participation is not really a superannuation lever, but it's an obvious way of taking the burden, effectively just increasing the participation rate as much as you can. Other things have been done. Susan Ryan's been appointed as an ambassador for mature age employment. There's now a $10,000 grant to employers who take on mature age employees, and other measures recommended by the Law Reform Commission. So just keeping aware of the time, my conclusion is that we can afford old age. We need a more efficient retirement income system. The ideas behind that are sitting behind the recommendation 11 in the Financial System Inquiry. There's been a lot of thought gone into that, so that's something that we can implement. There have been age pension changes already announced. The entitlement age going up progressively from 67 up to 70. The assets test changes. And lastly, the proposal from there, or at least it was not really a proposal, but at least the examination of the issues by the Productivity Commission in increasing the age at which we can actually access superannuation. Again, that has flow-on impacts on the age pension. So that concludes my formal remarks, and I'm now going to hand over to Cassandra.